Okay, hello there. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, what we are going to be doing today is introducing you to what to you might be a new software. This software is called Blender. Blender is a 3D modeling software. So it's three-dimensional software. You can edit and create 3D models, as you'll see here in a little bit. It's a ridiculously powerful program, and the beauty of Blender is it's completely free. You can get it off the internet. You can just do a search for Blender, go to their website, and update to the most recent version, whatever that happens to be. So if you haven't played around with three-dimensional software, so I'm just going to basically get into the main frame here. If you haven't played around with three-dimensional software before, it is a challenge at first. So a few things that you need to be aware of in three-dimensional software is that you are going to want to frequently rotate your space. Okay, because what you see from one angle might be different than what you see from another angle or another perspective. Okay, so just be aware of that. What you see isn't necessarily what you get unless you rotate and view all perspectives. So on that note, what we're going to be learning today is just a whole bunch of shortcuts and how to kind of explore the user interface of Blender. And I have a fraction of the knowledge of what this program does, and there's tons of YouTube videos out there if you'd like to learn more, but I'm just going to show you the basic interface as well as some editing skills. In addition, if you'd like to see some of these things that I'll be mentioning, if you go to my website, and our first assignment currently is called Blender Submarine, but it may not be at this point in time for you. But if you go to my website, you should, in some current Blender assignment, be able to find a link called for Blender Shortcuts and General Help. Click here. Hugely helpful reference that you might want to have on your screen in the background or something like that, because I'm going to go pretty quickly. So for example, when I talk about the manipulators, which are basically how you work inside the interface of it, that will be referenced here. Right, so there's a whole bunch of things, and again, I might forget some of them as we do this. So first off, I do want to talk about the manipulators. So in Blender, when you open it up, your first object here is just a cube. Okay, so if you want to rotate your screen in Blender, you just click the middle mouse. Okay, and you can grab your screen and rotate it. What you're also seeing here when you're rotating, you can see the axes that we're working in. So up here in the top right hand corner, you can see you've got the X and they're color coded, which is nice. So the X axis is the red one, the Y axis is the green one, and the Z axis is actually the vertical axis that we can't see right now, but you can imagine it. It shouldn't be a problem for you. Okay, so that's the cube. Another thing that you're gonna want to be able to do is zoom in and out, and that's just rolling your middle mouse. So if you scroll your middle mouse up, you'll zoom in. Scroll your middle mouse backwards, and you'll zoom out. Okay, so that is zooming. And the last thing you're going to want to be able to do is pan your screen. So basically move it so you can focus on a particular part. And what you do in that particular case, as it says on the document that I showed you, is you're going to hold down Shift on your keyboard and click your middle mouse. So if you'd like to do that, so if I hold down Shift and I click my middle mouse, what it does is it actually grabs my screen, and I can move it and kind of focus on a particular area. Okay, so that's one quick thing, is you should know how to zoom, rotate, and pan. Another thing is that you're going to want to know is how to have different views. So right now, the view that we are looking at, and this is a very typical one, is right here called user perspective. So first of all, it's just at the user's leisure how you rotate it. So that's why it's called user. And perspective means that things that are further away get smaller. So you can actually see, even though this is a cube, in the distance it is getting a little bit smaller. It's angling in. Okay, so just to show you some really quick keyboard shortcuts for that, you're not going to really have to play around with these too much, but I do want to introduce them. There are some keyboard shortcuts that are right here. Okay, and it has to do with the number pad on your keyboard. So if you've got a number pad off to the right side of your keyboard, you're going to have to make sure that the num lock is turned on. Okay, and you can basically view what I have here. So I'll just talk you through them. It's not going to mean much at the moment, but the big idea is if I press the number 1 on my keyboard, you can see it instantly says front orthographic. Okay, or if I press Control 1, it instantly says back orthographic. Or if I press 3, that's the right orthographic. Or Control 3 is the left orthographic. They generally work with the odd numbers. and 5 is a toggle between perspective and orthographic. So I'll talk about that difference right now. So perspective I've already talked about. So you can see it says left perspective. What that means is what's in the distance will appear smaller. So if I go to a wireframe view, which I'll teach you later on, what you can see is further in the distance, the cube, the back wireframe here, looks smaller, even though it's a cube. That's why it's perspective. The closer part is bigger, the further part is smaller. Generally, when you're modeling, you're going to want to have an orthographic view so you have a real idea about the measurements, but perspective is a useful one. If I press 5 again, it shouldn't surprise you that I'm just seeing only a square, even though it's a cube. And the reason why you're only seeing a square here is because you're in the orthographic view. Orthographic view means that all the measurements are real measurements, so even if something's further away, it appears the same size as something that's closer. So this cube is the same on the front and the back. You'll even see if I happen to rotate my screen here, still a cube. But from the orthographic view, I'm in perspective again, but if I go to the orthographic view, there we go, you're not seeing the back side of it. Okay, so there's some views. You can play around with those, and there's some other manipulators. Okay, the next thing I want to show you, and this is basically all we're going to be doing in this lesson, is how to create new objects and how to manipulate them. So let's go ahead and just kind of look at that. Okay, so what you're seeing here is actually a wireframe view. I didn't tell you how to get out of and into the wireframe view, so there is a keyboard shortcut that can help you with that. So it's right, like I said, right here again. What we're going to see is the wireframe to solid view. If you'd like to toggle between those, it's Shift and Z. So if I go, and you might, again, probably you're going to want to pause this video frequently and practice along with me. But if I press Shift Z, it's solid. If I press Shift Z again, it's wireframe. And those are advantageous at different points in time. So that's Shift Z, solid mode, and Shift Z, wireframe mode. Okay, so there's some keyboard shortcuts for you as well. So let's get into creating objects. So if I wanted to delete this object, I could simply select it. So I'm just literally clicking on it and press delete on my keyboard. So it's gone. There's no object there right now. Now some of you might be wondering what this little white and red circle is doing. That's basically your target point. So if you create a new object, so I'll just show you how to create a new object. And right before I do that, I want to talk about the two modes that you'll generally be in. You're generally going to be in object mode, which is creating objects, manipulating objects, moving objects. And the other mode you'll be in is called edit mode. Okay, and I can't get into edit mode right now because I don't have anything to edit at all. So let's make an object. So we are going to add, so right here. And there's tons of these, but we're going to add a mesh, and let's just go ahead with the basic cube. So this target is the center of where your object is going to be added. You can move that target, so if you're like, oh, I would like to have a cube over here, you can click on the target right here, so the cursor, you can move it, and then if I add another cube, it's placed in that area. We're going to show you how to move them around anyways, so it's not a big deal, but that's how you can create them. Okay, and I'm going to go back into solid mode, but the modes at this moment don't matter. Okay, so there's kind of an introduction for you. Others of you might be wondering what this is up here. If you ever see that, that's just the camera. We will do some actual rendering of a video at some point in time, but that's way past where we are. Okay, so I've got a cube here, and the three manipulators that you would like to practice with right now, and then you're going to have a goal after that. The manipulators are off to the left-hand side. There's three major ones, these top three right here, called move, called rotate, and called scale. And they do exactly as you would expect. So if I click on the move tool and click on my object, you'll see that you've got axes here. If you click on a particular axis, so like the green one, which is the y-axis, you can drag and move it along the y-axis. You can drag and move it along the x-axis. You can drag and move it along the z-axis. Okay? What you can also do, a couple other shortcuts for you. If you click inside the white, you can kind of grab it and have it freely move, which can be handy, but can also make things pretty tricky. Okay? And lastly, there is a keyboard shortcut that you might want to be aware of. And it's right here. So it's the letter G. G stands for grab. So I believe if we press the letter G, it allows us to grab the object. Okay, it's kind of the same as grabbing it by the middle white part, so the exact same mode there, okay? So that is the move tool. Next, let's look at the scale tool next. So again, practice this along with me. So the scale tool has a variety of options here. So first of all, if you click in the middle of the scale tool and drag your mouse out from the center, now that didn't work as well as I had hoped. There we go. Okay, so it should have worked like that. Here's another aside. Again, another keyboard shortcut. Control Z. So general shortcuts right here. Control Z is undo. Okay, so yeah, if you click on the middle of the scale tool, sometimes it's hard to get to, but if you do, you scale your object in all 3 dimensions, vertically, horizontally, and depth-wise as well. Okay. If you want to scale in just one direction, just like you do with the move tool, you grab one of those toggles. So if I want to scale it along the y-axis, just grab the y toggle and drag inwards towards the center, outwards if you want to scale it smaller or shorter. So you can imagine you can make a wall for a house, right? There's a thin wall. If you want to make it taller, you can make it taller. You want to make it longer, you can make it longer. So those are the scale tools that really allow you to manipulate your object. I mean, you can turn a sphere. So if I added, let's say for example, a sphere, I could make it look like an egg, right? If I just drag it along one axis, it's kind of an egg shape. Okay, so that's the manipulator of the scale tool. The last tool is the rotate tool. I won't use the sphere for it because it won't really show you very much, so I'm just going to bring in a cube again here. Okay, and the rotate tool again does what you'd expect it to do. So when you when you grab one of the arcs here, you'll rotate it along and around that axis. So this rotates it around the x-axis. If I grab the green one, it will rotate it around the y-axis. Okay, if I grab the blue one, it'll rotate it around the z-axis. So those are the 3 manipulators. So you can make objects, you can edit them, you can move them, you can scale them, you can rotate them. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is how to edit a particular part of the object, and now we have to get into a different mode for. So let's say, for example, I didn't want a basic cube or rectangular prism shape. I wanted to grab, I'm just going to delete this for now and add it again. I want to grab just one corner and move it. So I just want to grab like this corner and move it up. Okay, now what the mode that you have to get in for that is called edit mode. So currently we're in object mode. We can move the object, scale the object, etc., etc. But we can't just edit the object in particular ways. So the edit mode, and this will be the last thing we do, the edit mode is, if you use a keyboard shortcut, is pressing tab on your keyboard. So if we, right here, general shortcuts, to toggle between object and edit mode, you press the tab key. Okay, so if I go ahead and press tab, oh, it doesn't seem to, oh yeah, there we go. So I press tab and it goes to edit mode, and all of a sudden you get these new things that you actually don't need to know much about. All I want to do in this particular case, the only thing you need to be aware of in edit mode is you can edit, so there's 3 buttons here. You can edit vertices, so vertex or corners, you can edit edges, and you can edit faces. Okay, so if I'm on vertex select, I can select one, or if I hold down shift, I can select multiple vertices. Okay, so if I, for example, just clicked only on that vertice and I went to my move tool, I can move just not the whole object, but just that single vertice up. So you can see right there, all I've done is only edited that vertice. Okay, you can also, if you want to turn it to wireframe, shift Z, you can see the wireframe. There's a variety of things you can do, right? You could do so many things. You can also, if you'd like to, you can grab an edge. So I'm on edge select mode. I could grab an edge, and if I wanted to, I could move that down, up, left, right, do whatever I want to. So you can manipulate or edit your objects with the edit mode. Okay, so that's kind of cool as well. Okay, the other thing that you might want to be aware of is just when you're in edit mode. So let's say I want to select a variety of vertices. You can also draw if I'm just going to deselect those. If you press the letter B, B stands for box. So if you press the letter B, if you drag a box over an area, it will select all of either those vertices, faces, or edges, depending on which you've decided to do. So I selected all those vertices, which allows me to edit them. Or if I wanted to just select these top 2 vertices, I could do that as well. Okay, so that's the edit mode, the object mode, wireframe, etc. The last thing I want to show you before I challenge you to do something on your own is finally the 4 views. So this right here is just the perspective view. If you want to see multiple views at once, the keyboard shortcut in that particular case, if I can find it on my document here, the keyboard shortcut is, just gotta find it. Right here. So general views, quadrant or single view, Control-Alt-Q. Okay, so if you press Control-Alt-Q, Control-Alt-Q, what you get is 4 views, and 3 of them are locked. Like you'll notice in these 3 views, you can't actually rotate. You can zoom in, you can pan, but you can't actually rotate. It's locked in top orthographic, front orthographic, right orthographic, and this is the one that you can rotate in. The reason that this might be helpful, so I'm just going to go back to object mode, press tab, and delete the object. The reason this might be helpful, my first challenge for you is going to be creating a stack of boxes. The reason this might be helpful is if you create them only in the perspective view, you won't be able to see if they're actually on top of each other. So let me just quickly show you what I mean by that. So if I add a cube here, okay, so there we go. And if I add another cube, let's just say I add a second cube and move it up, you can't see very well necessarily in this view if they're perfectly touching, whereas it's really easy if you look at the front or right views if they're stacked perfectly on top of each other. Okay, so my challenge to you is to create a stack of 3 boxes that are perfectly on top of each other. The bottom box should be bigger, the second box should be a medium size, and the top box should be a smallest size, and they should be rotated, kind of have different angles around the z-axis on top of each other. So, and make sure they're touching. So if you want this view, you can do that. If not, you can just use perspective view, which is Control-Alt-Q, and you can go back into that view. Okay?